I
Turkey
think
coin coming out.
K for K turkey coin. You heard it first. Yeah.
There actually was a video I made where I talked about a K for K coin, but it was just as like in an example. I wasn't making one. Because I was showing how they're definitely going to make like a whitelist for what pools get bought out by the AMM bot. Like they're going to decide ahead of time, is my opinion. Because I did an example of like if I had a bunch of Ethereum and I wanted to make a coin just for me that only I would be able to extract basically free pulse out of. I think if you had like, it takes a lot of Ethereum to get the free stuff, but like if you had 10,000 ETH, you could technically give yourself a billion pulse for free.
Interesting.
If you just, because if they just auto did all the pools by the AMM bot, buying it up and filling it with pulse, you could make these pools with ETH, and then it would actually fill up with tons of pulse, and then you could extract it. So that's why I think they're only going to pick specific pools in a whitelist. Yeah.
That actually makes total sense. And Richard actually has said on one or multiple occasions that there may be some tokens that don't get considered in the fork. So that does make sense, because then you could just play it and get a bunch of free. Well, I guess yeah, because if you're the only one with the coins and you create the LP,
That's
you
what I'm
basically get
saying.
free. Yeah, you're right. You get free. Yeah, you're right. It can't happen that way. No way.
That's why I said so. Like,
Yeah, good
and some of
point.
the stuff like Richard never talks about, but I put it on my YouTube, and it's like nobody says that's not the case. So I think it is. It just Richard doesn't draw attention to like because it's also stuff that I don't even. Well, I don't want to say, but there's definitely some things that are being worked on to make it even better, and there's really no reason to, I guess, bring everything to light. I just trying to dispel that type of FUD where people are like, "Oh, people are going to do this." And I'm like, "Well, if that were the case, it just means we're going to have a whitelist, and they just only do it for pools that are legit, not the potential fake ones." Because that would be a risk if they came out and said, "Yo, every pool that exists, it doesn't matter. We're not going to vet it." Then I'd be like, "Well, this is a problem then."
Sure.
But so that's why I just put that stuff out there to dispel FUD early.
No, that's dude, great perspective. That's something you should talk about more because it's like, yeah, because that if somebody thinks about that and they think it's going to work, they could absolutely play the system. Just yeah,
Yeah, I
too
mean,
much.
it's basically just giving yourself a free airdrop with no risk because you own all of the coins and the
Exactly.
ETH already, and
Exactly.
you would just even if you didn't have the money, I'm not sure if you'd be able to. You probably wouldn't be able to do a flash loan because that's only in like one block, and you'd have to know like when it's going to launch or something. But you could just contact a whale in the system and be like, "Yo," and you could talk to them, and then they can put up the stuff, and you just cut in a deal with them because
Yep.
brought them the idea. So you don't actually even need the money yourself. You just contact people who have the ETH, and you could just get free stuff. But it doesn't matter. I don't think so because they're going to whitelist, is my opinion.
So what do you think the criteria for the whitelist is going to be? Like, how are they going to do that? Like by
Hmm.
date?
I
By
mean, definitely like, I mean, there's just obvious ones that are going to make it normally, I think, like SHIB
of course.
and Link,
Yep.
and just kind of like the major DeFi ones like Curve and those pools, like stablecoin pools that are like whatever those will come over and be filled, in my opinion. Um, but yeah, I don't think like if it's just like some random coin with almost no liquidity, or even if it has high liquidity, they're gonna have to look into that because we don't want to be giving around like billions of pulse for free to people.
Sure. Well, and at this point too, since the sacrifice phase is over, the supply is already determined. So, well, I guess the supply. Well, that's a question. I guess yeah, because if the supply is already determined, there's only a finite amount of pulse that the AMM bot can use to harvest those pools, right?
It's using, well, Richard says still that it's like like 2 to 2.5% of the total supply
Mm.
will be used to mint and then purchase up and then also pair with in pulsex. So is that a set amount? I think we got that number based on how much like WETH there was in the system, like in Ethereum, like how much Ethereum, what percent of it is in liquidity pools or
Mm.
DeFi. And you can
Gotcha.
kind of get that because Ethereum itself can't be used in DeFi. You can only use wrapped Ethereum.
Hmm.
And so going by that number, and then we use the square root of that number to get kind of how much we'd have to use to buy it up and put it into the pools. Because I think there was around 6% or something throughout all of DeFi. At least the last time I checked, these were months ago figures. So who knows how much has changed since then? But that's how they came up with 2.5%. Because there's like a few, there's at least like 1 million or so in Aave, and then there's like there's about 1% in all the dexes of Ethereum. You can check this out on like DeFiPulse.com unless they change their UI again. They do change it from time to time. But if you go to DeFi Pulse, you can check like, oh, dexes. All right, here's Balancer, Bancor, Uniswap, SushiSwap, Curve. All right, how much Ethereum is in each of these out of total supply? And like I did all the math in the one video a while back, and it was like they barely got around 1% in dexes. So I was like wondering where Richard got this 2.5% thing, and I guess it's because they're including Aave and Compound, because those hold lots of WETH. Like you can actually check the WETH contract on Etherscan and see what percent of, like you can see how much there is and then see how much that is of a percent of total supply. And that's how much is in DeFi, you could say. And so I think that's where they got the number. So I think it'll actually mint less. But apparently I just saw this the other day. Some entity, some address on testnet was able to empty all of Aave and Uniswap v3 of the tokens, basically. And so if they're able to do that, then they can get access to that amount, and then like of all those PRC20s and stuff and the Pulse. And so they'll have to pair up with all that extra amount of tokens they got at the DEX prices. It gets so confusing, dude. There's so much that goes into it. So it's really cool. I'm glad they have the best devs working on it, because they're running simulations in parallel, like lots and lots of stuff happening.
They have
and
to
so they're really battle testing this stuff, because if they really care about launching something that has 100% flawless operation again, and it's going to be a layer 1, then I'm not surprised they're running into these old bugs that maybe BNB, Binance Smart Chain, hasn't found and hasn't fixed, because they just don't care as much, but Richard does. And so I'm glad that they're fixing that stuff. That's a good sign, not a bad sign, you know? Like I heard this before when there was like, if they were bad devs, they would have released it already.
Good point.
And that's how I see it. There's just like a lot of the devil is in the details of like, oh, if we launch it and we don't think of this, that could be bad. So there's like little things like this, that the conversations you got to have, where the closer you get to the deadline, the more you're like, well, what about this? Ooh, let's think about that. Let's make sure we accounted for that. So some people are like, they think it's so easy to just do the world's largest airdrop ever. And they're like, oh, you just copy the code and launch it. What's wrong with that? It's like, no, if it was that easy, everyone else would have already done it already.